Take.
So with our monthly T&Bs, this is tangentially tied to mindfulness insofar as I feel like it's very difficult to not have a mindful tea. Like tea invites mindfulness in its preparation and holding it and drinking it, and the volatile oils coming off. Like it just invites presence, I think. And so that's how we came to offer this as part of the Mindful Healthcare Collective. And so I've been focusing each month on a couple of teas, which really are botanical medicine. Tea or tisane is an herb steeped in water or extracted with water. And so there's really no distinction between botanical medicine and tea making. And in that line, I wanted to talk this month about heart opening teas. And this is a new concept to Western medicine. This idea that an herb or really anything can have a kind of emotional or spiritual influence on the body. We want to talk about botanical medicine or supplements or conventional medications as what do they do biochemically? Like this one's GABAergic, this one does this or that. And this idea of sort of this something as nebulous as heart opening can be a new idea to approach. But as my mentor, Dr. Tarone Lodog says, people don't do things for thousands of years that don't work. And so here we are, with a 5,000-year history of heart-opening teas. And what does this mean? People have used them in the past for dealing with grief, for opening to love, whether that may be a romantic love or a love, say, of a new child. Or we may be opening the heart to all of the experiences, that life has. And so that's where we're going. We're going to talk about a couple herbs that have been used throughout history in different cultures for those purposes, and how to use them today in a way that tastes good and is nice. So with that, why don't we start? We're going to start with rose petals because, how lovely. Rose petals are traditionally used as heart openers. They have a very light, delicate sense. In Ayurveda, they're used for pacifying pitta, or the very hot, spicy, fiery, drive to work, drive to achieve. A lot of medical professionals often are pitta dominant, looking at who we are and how we live and what we do in our lives. And rose petals invite this pitta pacification. So you see this like light astringency, but in a way that is very floral and delicate. And typically it's used in teas or foods. Like sometimes you'll see crushed rose petals atop like a pistachio cardamom dessert or something like that. And so you can incorporate this as a food. It tastes good. Or in a tea. And you can brew a rose petal tea, but it's going to be quite astringent. It is nice added to stuff. And so I've brought my favorite option for this. This is made by a friend of mine who owns this tea company. It's Welkova Tea. So she does a chai that is got some rose petal in it and some cinnamon spice. And so I really love this one. I don't get any kickbacks. I went to fellowship with this gal and think she does a really great job with her teas. So that's her celebration chai. But maybe on an afternoon that you're like, that over driving energy where you're like, all right, checkbox, like task, and like you're gonna like steamroll over whoever is in the way of like task completion, like a little rose petal, just the opening of the heart. So that is the rose petal. Next, I wanted to share Look, I got fancy here with some screen sharing. Um, are you seeing the hibiscus there? Okay, thanks. I wanted to share the hibiscus. This is a heart opener in several traditions, most widely in Latin America. Um, the herb of love or desire. And interestingly, from a Western standpoint, it is a very potent driver of nitric oxide production with some vasodilation and some influence on the systolic and diastolic, especially diastolic blood pressures. And so in that way, we see this, kind of Western correlation with what it does. But if you've ever tasted or tried hibiscus tea, it's just like such a beautiful, like floral opening scent. And actually, I love hibiscus and the rose petals together too. And anything that's that kind of that dark red too is gonna, like beets are another good thing to drive nitric oxide production. But used for a long time as a heart opener in a big part of the world, and is just a really, really delicious way to integrate some of these concepts and herbs into daily life. I actually really love hibiscus tea iced, and it is great with a little bit of ginger and rose petal and a little like fresh mint and lemon on the glass. So that is the hibiscus. Let's see. Another one I wanted to share. Are you seeing the mother's milk? Okay. So mother's milk, you may be wondering why I'm telling you to drink a lactation tea. It's funny to me that this is a lactation tea because the data is not strong in terms of it inducing lactation per se. The traditional use of either shatavari or shatavari is another Ayurvedic herb. It's in a root. It's a root herb that's then dried and chopped up and brewed as a tea or decoction. And it traditionally has been used for times in women's lives where they're going through a transition, most notably after birth, right, approaching birth and in the postpartum period, and then again through the menopause transition. Shatavari is lubricating. You think of those times, both of them, as progesterone dominant times where there's less natural lubrication in all of the mucosal organs, particularly the gut and the vagina. And then beyond that, especially in pregnancy, but also in menopause, it's thought of as heart opening. It's traditionally started at 36 weeks of gestation, so about a month before the baby's due, thinking that it would open the heart for the baby as the woman moved towards birth, and then traditionally drank through the postpartum period as well for the same purpose. And in the perimenopausal time frame, it's a little more nebulous because you don't have like an actual little baby, coming at the end of that, but it's more of an entry, if you will, into the sage portion of life, the grandmother, the elder, birthing oneself into that and the heart opening to that new role. It tastes wonderful. Like the cardamom in there is just so good. And my favorite way to make this is to have a tea latte with oat milk and then the shatavari cardamom in there. So you heat and foam up that oat milk like you're making a usual latte, but then the tea bags are brewed in there. And that is a wonderful, wonderful treat. You can also use that in something so you've made this nice drink, then you can use it in overnight oats and it has a beautiful flavor. Oh my gosh, sorry. Cat's here. And cat comes to all my talks. This is my go-to gift too if somebody's having a baby. Shatavari cardamom tea with a little recipe and then a little journal book. So we can't step into the same river twice. And it's a nice time to record, someone's thoughts in that moment. So that is shatavari cardamom, the traditional Ayurvedic heart opening herb. And then the last one I'll share with you. This is such a nice cat, you guys. Sorry, I'm slow on the zooming. Okay, here we go. You see that little pile of dried berries? Okay. This is hawthorn or hawthorn berry. And they taste a little bit fruity, like berry-ish. They have a little bit of astringency, like the rose petals or rose hips, especially. They will taste best brewed alongside something else that tastes great, like the hibiscus. The reason I wanted to bring up hawthorn is in Western society, especially, I think we have very few resources to deal with grief or the hurting of one's heart. If you're lucky enough to have a day that you can take off work, it's just, it's like, well, you do that and you get back to your schedule. And so introducing some ideas of ritual or ceremony that could be offered to someone in times of grief, I think has tremendous medicinal potential. Hawthorn is interesting. It was in the US Pharmacopoeia until about 1960, actually as a weak inotrope. I'm so sorry about this cat, you guys. So it's used in the instances of heart failure, literally like the failure of the heart, is a positive inotropic herb. And sort of in kind of like digoxin, really. But it also was used traditionally, it's grown in North America, so used by indigenous tribes here in North America for heartbreak, not only of like the heart is broken, like it won't pump, but of emotional or spiritual heartbreak. And it has a quality of it of being settling, nourishing. It's not going to cause trouble for people in terms of the positive inotropic effect. Like you could give it to a otherwise healthy person and not expect any adverse cardiac events with it. I think about it, especially like it's the perfect medicine, right, for a Takayasu arteritis, like someone that literally their heart has stopped beating well because of emotional heartbreak, right? Like that this herb targets both of those elements. And so that's a good way to remember it. How I use this clinically, or with a friend or with, myself is upon grief of some kind. This is a gift that I would give to someone, preferably in a tea, but if somebody was not into teas, they do make capsules like under the mental health umbrella. When you're walking around Whole Foods, like you're going to find it next to the other mental health supplements. And giving them a tea again and saying, this is a tea for caring for yourself in a time of grief, and then offering that to them. If I was making the blend myself, I might put in the hawthorn, maybe some like a neutral adaptogen like tulsi, a little bit of hibiscus, maybe sprinkled with a few rose petals, something like that. And then give that as a gift. But I think it's nice to have something to offer, so many times it's hard to know what might be right to bring. And this is something from the heart, as it were. So, and interesting too, from a historical context, for those of us in medicine. So that's about right. I was hoping to have about 20 minutes worth of talking and then a few minutes for any questions. And that's it. Just these little quick T&Bs.
Thank you so much, Anne. Monica put in a question for you in the chat.
Oh,
She asks, is hawthorn the same as amla? Her family uses this.
oh, you know what? I am familiar with omelet and I sure don't know. Hawthorn berry, yes, also called amla. I never made that connection. Thank you for bringing that up. I don't know if you can type back or answer, but is amla used for the same indications as this? It's a good antioxidant too. Use it for a cold. Yeah. It's probably the antioxidant function on that one, kind of like elderberry. It's a potent antioxidant, good for colds.
And I had a question about hibiscus. Are there any adverse reactions we should be aware of if someone is also concurrently taking antihypertensives?
In the studies that I looked at, no, it didn't drop the diastolic enough to where they got hypotensive, even if they were on a calcium channel blocker. It was dropping the diastolic 5 to 8 millimeters mercury. And so it was enough sometimes that a motivated person, if they were taking 3 cups of hibiscus tea daily, could decrease their dose perhaps, but there weren't any adverse effects for people taking them concurrently. Although I will say I have not recommended it in patients with POTS syndrome. I think, when you get that postural orthostatic tachycardia, they're just kind of sensitive beings in general. And, like keeping people's blood pressure is probably a good idea, as stable as possible in that scenario. But for your garden variety chronic hypertensive, it's fine.
Great, thanks. And I also remember reading that it had some diuretic properties. Is that right?
Yeah, a little bit. It has increased renal blood flow from the nitric oxide action, and so you'll get a little bit more GFR.
Awesome. And any issues that you'd read about or clinically experienced with diuretics with hibiscus?
No, there wasn't any um, interactions noted either in the studies when I did a lit review on it or on the US Natural Medicines database.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Monica is saying that she's sorry her microphone can't work because
Yeah,
she's
no
walking her
worries.
dog. And then that her parents are getting amla from Amazon, not sure how reliable it is, asking about good sources.
Yeah, that's always a good question because Amazon, even if it's a good brand on there, you don't know about the storage. I used to live in Phoenix and there was really big Amazon warehouses there and they were probably like 180 degrees inside, because the ambient temp was close to 120. And so that's a concern. In terms of amla and for herbs in general, I really like mountain rose herbs. I know that they have amla. And any of the Ayurvedic herbs, amla included, a good source is Banyan Botanicals. They are, I think, based in New Mexico, but very reputable and screened for heavy metals as well, because sometimes that can be an issue with Ayurvedic supplements, particularly because a lot of them are roots. And so they're in the ground, like absorbing those heavy metals if they're grown in an area that has that in the soil. So especially on the Ayurvedic herbs, I really will only, order from them or Organic India or Gaia. Interesting thing too with that kind of thing is, for example, maca is grown in the highlands of Peru. And if you grow maca in China, it doesn't have the same medicinal properties in it. Like wherever the thing is supposed to grow is where it's going to have the best medicine, you know. So trying to buy from places that you trust, I think is worthwhile. Sometimes you can get good stuff on Amazon, like they have Frontier Herbs, which is a really good brand. I think it's just the storage that's a wild card on that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Kennard. And your cat did not distract, but only added to the talk, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for coming. It's good to see you. Thanks. All right, bye. Thanks, Nicheng, for hosting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for doing this, Anne.
You bet.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you.
Including cats.
You enjoy your walk.